Today we're going to restore this 1974 Martin D-28. It needs a neck reset and it needs some new frets. As you can see here, the frets are sticking up quite a bit and they're pulled up because somebody wanted to have a straight playing surface. Now that leaves them feeling pretty sharp and it's still not straight, so we're going to take them out and make sure that the wood itself on the neck is straight and then hammer in new frets, and that will make it play really nicely and look better than what it does at this point. If the neck angle is correct, you want to see a straight edge lying just on top of the bridge. But as you can see here, the straight edge is kind of resting a few millimeters below the top surface of the bridge, which is what we're going to try to address. So when we're done with the neck reset, this straight edge is going to rest on top of the bridge. We're also going to make a new saddle and a new nut. But the first thing we're going to do is heat up the neck and take it off. I'm taking off the 15th fret to gain access to a little gap that's between the dovetail and the neck block. I'm putting on some super glue around the fret slot just to make sure that there's no extra chipping out while I'm doing this. I'm going to drill a hole here. I'm starting with a small bit and then I'm going to increase its size. I'm heating up the fretboard extension to soften the glue so I can separate the fretboard from the top of the guitar. I'm using a heat stick invented by Ian Davlin to heat up the neck. I've been trying to avoid using too much steam for this because it can tend to disturb the finish around the fretboard and the neck. I like to keep it a little wet around it just to make sure that I don't scorch the wood. I'm using this jig to push the neck upwards. After it's been heated and steamed, the glue is probably ready to let go anytime. I like to use hide glue throughout the neck resetting process. I like the strength of it and how it also can be easily dissolved for the next guy. Hide glue needs to be warmed up, so I'm putting it in a double boiler and giving it a couple hours to dissolve. I'm scraping off the old glue, and I like to use a dull chisel for this because I find that it really just takes off the glue and not so much wood. This is a white glue and this one is particularly sticky. The only gluing surface on a dovetail is really right here. So all the glue that's on the heel itself is almost unnecessary. And it doesn't help that there's so much material here when we're going to try to change the angle of the neck. So I'm going to remove wood from the inside of the heel so I have less of a surface that's resting on the guitar body. It's pretty easy to see where the fretboard's going to end up on the side here. So I'm also taking this opportunity to remove some lacquer that's under the fretboard because lacquer doesn't really glue that well to wood. After using the chisel to remove most of the glue, I use some sandpaper just to create a fresh surface under the fretboard. I like to brush on a little bit of acetone just on the side here just to keep the lacquer from chipping when I'm doing it. It just softens it a bit. I'm pulling sandpaper through between the body and the heel of the neck. It serves two purposes. One is to change the angle ever so slightly, and the other one is to fit the heel to the shape of the sides right here. The center line of the neck right now doesn't quite line up with the center line of the bridge. So that means that I got to correct for that when I'm doing the sanding. Ideally, I would want it to be just about there. I'm checking my progress as I go to make sure that I don't go too far and end up with an overset neck. I've moved about 1.5 millimeters now from my original line, and I'm definitely getting close. So I need to be careful with my neck sanding so I can dial it in properly. I'm really happy with how this neck is fitting right now. It's not quite on center between the D and the G string, but it is on center between the two E strings, and that's more important to me because I want to make sure that the two E strings have the same amount of space from the string out to the edge of the fretboard on each side, the bass side and the treble side. I'm making shims for the neck to make the dovetail itself oversized. So when I put it back into the guitar, it'll be too big for it, so then I can reshape it and have a perfect fit. The glue is ready. It's warm enough and has the right consistency, kind of like maple syrup, and we're ready to glue on the shims. We're going to leave this to clamp overnight. The hide glue needs about 24 hours to become really solid, so we'll get back to this tomorrow. We're back, the shims are glued on, and we're ready to reshape the dovetail to make it fit again. As you can see, the neck doesn't go all the way down anymore, so now we're going to take material off the shims and hopefully end up with a perfect fit. Now that we've made sure that we have a good fit, I think we're ready to glue on. The dovetail is a self-locking joint, so you really don't need many clamps for it. I only got these two, and we'll let it sit now for 24 hours before we get to the fretwork. So we're back and it's time to do some fretwork. And I'm anticipating that this is going to be a difficult fret job for a few reasons. We have a lot of chipping around the frets from a previous refret. And there's also a couple cracks in the fretboard that I'm going to have to address. And it's also the fact that the neck doesn't have an adjustable truss rod. So I'm going to have to take that into account when I put the frets in. I'm going to try to reduce the chipping by heating up the frets with the soldering iron and then quickly putting some super glue around the fret slot just to make sure that any chip doesn't just fall off. I've put super glue around the fret slot, so now I've kept the chipping down to minimum. I'm going to remove the glue now before I level the board to make everything straight before I put the frets in. I'm going to remove all the leftover glue from the last fret job and the glue that I just put in. I use this pick tool to get out most of it, and then I have a saw so I can shape the fret slot the way I want. I'm taking the strings on and off during this process just to make sure that I end up with the right amount of relief in the neck. I'm happy with the general relief it has now, so now I'm going to go up the grits and make it look really nice. The fretboard is ready, and now it's time to hammer in some frets. I've taken the strings on and off just to check how the relief is with the frets in. And right now it's at a point where I'm really happy with it. The frets are all in, and the next step is to cut them to size and bevel the edges and make it all feel nice and smooth. The frets are all done. I've beveled the edges and made it nice and smooth here. It's important for me that they look even on the side of it, so it almost looks like it hasn't had a refret. They came out great, and now it's time to do the saddles and the nut. It's time to make a new pickguard, and that starts off with a MDF template that I'm making based on the cutout of the old pickguard, so it matches nicely. It's still pretty straight and weird right here, so I'm going to bevel the edges a little bit, and then I'm going to also try to give a bit more of a vintage patina so it blends onto the guitar nicely. So this is the moment of truth. We're ready to put on strings and see how it all turned out. So here it is. The neck's on the right angle. I got the proper saddle height and the frets are in. It feels great, and now we'll just see what the customer says. I think he'll be happy. you.